Hey, welcome to the Eddie Hyatt Podcast. I'm your host and teacher, Eddie Hyatt, and I'm so glad to be with you today. This is Memorial Day, Monday, Memorial Day in America. Some of you I know are from other countries, and many of you would probably have similar type holidays. I know Canada does. Um, but Memorial Day in America is honoring those who have made the ultimate sacrifice for this nation to maintain its freedom, who has fought in wars to protect America's freedoms that were instituted by the founders of America. They paid the ultimate sacrifice. They gave their lives. They suffered and died. Now, it's I think there's something in this for all of us because I would call it the power of sacrifice. Um, and as Christians, we are called to die. Not necessarily, may not have. Some have had to die um, physically, but we are all called to die to our ego, to self. And Paul said it well in Galatians. I believe it's in chapter. It might be in chapter 1, 2. Let me see. Uh, where he said, "I have been crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live. Yet not I, but Christ liveth in me." So Paul there is talking about, about his life, his experience. I have been crucified with Christ. What's he talking about? He's talking about that Paul, that his ego, Paul has died. And he says, "Nevertheless, I live. Yet not I, but Christ lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me." In other words, Paul is no longer the center of Paul's life. Jesus Christ is now the center of Paul's life. The I, the ego, is no longer prominent and center. Now Jesus Christ is center. And because of that, Paul is willing to go anywhere and he's willing to do anything because that Christ would call him to do, because now Christ is the center of his life, not Paul. Oh, how there needs to be a dying to self in the American church today, in the North American church, and I'm sure the church around the world, how there needs to be a dying to self. Now, read a couple of passages. John 12:24, Jesus said, "Unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it produces much fruit." That there is a powerful principle there. And then John 15:3, "Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down his life for his friends." And there are many wonderful stories in America's military history of people making the ultimate sacrifice. Um, I was sharing one earlier today in church where you are, and I don't have the story in front of me, but it was in World War II. There was an individual. He was with a unit. They were in Italy, fighting the Nazis, and they were in a small village, but obviously there was a large German army unit that was approaching them, and then engaged them, and they were greatly outnumbered, so they retreated. But one individual stayed behind. He was hid in a house to try to get radio contact to bring reinforcements. And so he finally was able to contact an American artillery unit, and so he was able to describe where he was, and they were able to get his exact location. And so he told them to fire, and they said, "Wait a minute, that's where you are." He said, "Yes, I know. The town by this time was full of German Nazi soldiers. They had not yet found him." He said, "Yes, I know, but there's more of them than us. Go ahead, fire away." So they did, and he was killed. But later, when the troops were able to regroup and come back into that town, they found his dead body, but 100 German Nazi soldiers all around him. He was willing to sacrifice his life for victory in that situation. And sometimes, in life, we have to make sacrifices in order to move ahead. Um, and this is just how life is in this world. Somebody has sacrificed for you to get where you are today. Probably mostly your parents, maybe some close friends and different people, but somebody has sacrificed for you to be where you are today. Um, People have sacrificed for Sue and I to be where we are today. We have had friends in life have made some incredible sacrifices for us to be able to move ahead in God's calling. Uh, I want to read today because we're talking about this is Memorial Day. I want to read about some of the incredible um, sacrifices that was made by the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence when the American British colonies took action and severed ties with Great Britain. There were 56 signers of this Declaration of Independence saying that they were no longer going to be a part of Great Britain. And it was, in the eyes of the British, in the eyes of the British Parliament and King George, it was an act of treason punishable by death. They were all putting their lives on the line. They were making a sacrifice for themselves, their children, and for their future posterity. And at the end of the Declaration, they said something like this. I was just looking to see if I had a book with a statement. Yeah, here's one right here. Uh, they said we pledge our lives and our honor, trusting in the providence of Almighty God, pledging our lives and our honor. And I'm turning over. I think it's probably coming up right here, but it's a powerful statement. So I want you to hear. They said, and for this at the end, after declaring why they were separating from Great Britain, they said, and for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Now, I think it was at least 27 of these people were lawyers. Some of them, a number of them, were successful merchants. Some of them were farmers with large farms, plantations. Most all of them were people of means and well educated, but they knew that they were putting their lives on the line when they signed this document and that they were going to be targeted. And so they said, we pledge, and for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. So let me just read to you what happened to these people. They were willing to make the sacrifice to put their lives on the line to sacrifice in order that their children, their posterity could live free and no longer live as British colonial subjects. And so of those 56 who signed the Declaration of Independence, 9 died of wounds or hardships during the war. 5 were captured and imprisoned, in each case with brutal treatment. Several lost wives, sons, or entire families. One lost his 13 children. 2 wives were brutally treated. All were at one time or another the victims of manhunts and driven from their homes. You see, the British targeted these people. They burned their homes. They destroyed their homes. There was one of the signers, um, a British, the commander of a British unit took his home and made it his headquarters, drove out him and his family and made it his headquarters. He contacted George Washington, told him what had happened, and told him to go ahead and destroy his home, which he did, and which happened. He lost everything. 12 signers had their homes completely burned. 17 lost everything they owned, yet no one defected or went back on his pledged word. Their honor and the nation they sacrificed so much to create is still intact. We're here today because somebody made a sacrifice. I also was reading something that really got my attention, and let me see if I have it here. Um, and it was about an individual by the name of John Hart. And I was giving a presentation in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and there was a pastor and his wife there, and they came up to me afterwards. And this John Hart, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, was her great, 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 and I'm sure not how many greats there was, like great, 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 great grandfather. Um, but the British, his wife was on her deathbed and dying in her home, and the British came and physically took him out of the home, and uh, and I guess he was imprisoned. and he escaped and he had to live out in the wilderness in caves and so on. When he was able to get back, his wife had died. He didn't know where his children were, and it was just simply a horrific situation. But he survived, and I'm telling you this because these people, they were willing to make the ultimate sacrifice so that their children and their descendants could be a free and a liberated people. And folks, God's calling people today who will no longer live out of self, but people who are willing to sacrifice for the sake of God's kingdom, sacrifice for the sake of others and for the advancement of God's kingdom. And uh, but those who do that, the promise is that's when you see so much fruit. As Jesus said in the statement that I read from John 12:24, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground, unless we're willing to let go of ego and self-centered pride, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it produces much fruit. May we die to ego today. May we die to self-centeredness, put our lives in God's hand, and see what he will do in a life that is totally given over to him. Hey, I'm Eddie Hyatt. God bless you. Have a happy Memorial Day, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. God bless you.